Welcome to the TELUS Originals DocTalks, a series of talks dedicated to craft, themes, and ideas behind TELUS Originals documentaries with the people behind and in front of the camera. I'm your host, Sabrina Rani Furminger, and for this episode, we'll be talking to Roger Collins about Union Street. Union Street was directed by Jamila Pomeroy, who won the award for Outstanding Director for a Feature Film at the 2023 Real World Film Festival for her remarkable work. The documentary chronicles the ongoing effects of racism, displacement, and the cultural erasure of African Canadians in Vancouver. Before systemic and political mechanisms destroyed Hogan's Alley, the historic Black neighborhood located on Union Street in the 1970s, the area was the home of train porters, speakeasies, juke joints, and a thriving community, and a regular touring stop for iconic musicians like Jimi Hendrix, Louis Armstrong, and Ella Fitzgerald. The reverberations of this thriving community and its intentional and egregious erasure are still felt. And in the face of adversity, a new generation of Black Vancouverites is working tirelessly to rebuild community and facilitate Black joy. Roger Collins is one of those tireless Black Vancouverites featured in Union Street. Roger was born and raised in Toronto to Caribbean parents from St. Kitts and St. Vincent. He's lived in Vancouver for just over 20 years now, and the last 17 of which he's been focused on having a family and connecting with the local arts community to create shows that help showcase some of Vancouver's amazing and emerging talent. It started with Foundation Radio, which was a bi-weekly live music and poetry event, which served as the inspiration for the wildly popular Calabash Bistro. Roger started the popular Caribbean restaurant with two partners in 2010. Calabash is a well-known hub for exciting nights of dancing, DJs, art shows, and live music. And Roger was at the center of the action, curating and creating a vibrant scene for artists and the community. That is, until a near-fatal car crash late one night in 2020 changed his life. These days, Roger is the proud owner and operator of the beloved culture and coffee shop Rise Up Marketplace in Strathcona, which we get to see a great deal of in the film. Today, we'll speak with Roger Collins about his life on and around Union Street. Roger Collins, welcome to TELUS Originals DocTalks.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so happy to have you. I'm so excited. Even just reading the words Calabash Bistro, I could not help but think about all the nights that I spent drinking rum, eating jerk, and just dancing. Oh, the stories that I could tell, but that's not what this show is. The show is about you and your story. So for people outside of Vancouver, and honestly for many people who live here and are kind of in their own bubbles, what is the magic of Union Street? What are the qualities that make your neighborhood so special?
I would think, the first thing that comes to mind is the history and, the energy, the vibe that was created there so long ago that is still kind of, still lingering and still really present right now. For us, like we're located, just around the corner from Union Street, but still attached to it in a way through the bike path and such. And, just being connected and being a part of that neighborhood is, like I was saying, it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to continue what was, displaced and removed, and to be able to, bring back some of the culture that was lost. So, yeah, it's a privilege.
So you talked a little bit about history. And before we talk about history of the neighborhood, the history of the Black community in Vancouver, I want to talk a little bit about your history. because I read in the bio that you grew up in Toronto. And, so in order for us to do a little bit of compare and contrast of Toronto to Vancouver, let's go back to your childhood. What area did you grow up in? What kind of a kid were you? Like, bring us back to your childhood in Toronto.
Yeah. So it was a very Caribbean household. My brother and my mom were both born in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I was born in Toronto. So with that being said, there was a lot of going back and forth from the Caribbean because that was home for them.
Yeah.
And so we went back and forth quite a bit whenever we could, and whenever my mom could afford it, or whenever there was a seat sale happening, back in the days, you could get cheap flights from Toronto. They didn't fly directly to St. Kitts. We'd have to go to Antigua or something, but we would find a way. I remember sitting in like small Cessnas, like these small planes, going from small islands. Yeah, when I was a kid. But, that being said, outside of my home, it was probably one of the most diverse places in the world to grow up, to be honest. Like, my neighbors to my left and right were Italian, and then Jamaican, and then, 4th-generation Canadian, and then on the other side it was like East Indian and Portuguese, and more Trinidadians, and more Africans, and more Scottish, and so it was beautiful going from basement to basement as a kid. You go from eating dal to looking on the shelves and then Scottish home and seeing pickled eggs, and then going to a Jamaican home, and eating ackee and saltfish. So to be honest, it was I feel very blessed to grow up in Toronto in that time. And we lived, in a few different areas around the city. We lived in North York, in the Jane and Finch area, and then we lived in Mississauga and Malton. I lived at College Street when I was a little older. I lived at a college in Lansdowne, so just outside of Little Italy and Portugal. Kind of all over, just kind of, we lived on Rogers Road in St. Clair kind of area, so like an Italian neighborhood, just
all over.
Yeah. And my mom moved to Brampton, and I think I was there for a short while, and after a while I was like, I moved downtown, and then from there just kind of started traveling. But my childhood was blessed. Like, my mom did the best with what she had, and she took me places, like we traveled a lot, and I think that was kind of very influential in my kind of growing up and what I wanted to do as an adult. So
and so I spent my teen years in Southern Ontario. I remember going downtown for Caravana and like just the dancing, the music, the costumes, the food. I'm a very food focused person.
Okay.
So like, did you used to go to Caravana as well?
Yeah. So as long as I can remember seeing to my teenage years with a pack of friends, like every year in between, Caravana was a big deal, in our household. I remember coming home from school and all of a sudden just seeing tons of shoes and bags, and I'd have cousins and family and friends coming up from New York and coming in from the Caribbean. People would fly in, it was that big, and I believe at the time and at its height, it was probably the second largest annual parade outside of Mardi Gras. I believe in the 80s or sometime in the late 80s or 90s. It was huge. And it was one of those things where you would always run into everybody. Like, everybody was down there for a few years, and all ethnicities and backgrounds, everybody enjoyed it. And it was a great way for us as Caribbean people to really showcase our culture and kind of go off for a few days,
You mentioned travel, you mentioned family being huge. What role did your Caribbean culture play in your childhood and, your early development?
In terms of like how it influenced me, or?
Yeah, it is like an open question, so I don't want to. Is it like a foundation stone? Because like I look at the work that you do, now and have done since you've come to Vancouver, and fostering and nurturing, culture and community has been huge. So I'm just wondering, for you in your formative years, like what role did it play for you?
I feel like they both coincide. And I'm going to say my mother and my brother and the culture itself. And when I say they coincide, I mean, she was a very welcoming person. Like if she met you, the first time she'd meet you, she'd kind of push me to the side and say, hey, come on in, and ask you if you wanted something to eat and drink. And then she'd start ordering me around and showing off. And, you know, she was kind of that kind of person, like very warm and loving. And, you know, and my brother was was very supportive and educational and smart and very street smart, but yet also an educator. So he was very influential in my I would say teachings of Caribbean culture, you know, deeper than the surface, you know. And you know, when we'd go back, we've been back together, just the two of us over the years, and it's a really foundational, as you say, foundational kind of trip, because you really get to dig your feet back into your roots, you know. And I feel like you know, coming full circle to your question, I feel like when I come back here, I feel compelled to share that because I just love the feeling that I have when I go down there. And I know I'm not alone, because literally at this point right now, if we went to the airport, there's a plane going somewhere to the Caribbean with hundreds of people, you know, every day.
Yeah.
So there is something magical about it, you know. And I felt if I could have the beauty and blessing of sharing that with other people, then that's kind of my mission, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna be
yeah, we could talk.
We're not in like a time travel vehicle or whatever, but we're gonna go from Toronto to Vancouver.
Okay.
You arrive in Vancouver. You have grown up in incredibly diverse, everywhere you've described, so diverse, and embracing, you know, different cultures, and you arrive in Vancouver. Tell me your first, you know, your first thoughts, your experiences, you know,
yeah,
and how it compared to Toronto.
Yeah, it was, you know, not to sound cliche, but it was a culture shock. It was definitely a culture shock. And in between living in Toronto and Vancouver, I lived in the Cayman Islands for a couple of years, or off and on a couple of times over a few years. So, you know, I was even spending a little bit more time in the Caribbean, and coming to Vancouver was definitely a culture shock, you know. And it took time to adjust, you know. I'll be honest, like when I first got here, I was like, I don't know how long I can last, or I don't know if this is the right place, but something felt right. You know, there's the reason I was here, and I just came across some really great people, you know, right away. And but I also did notice that there was a lack of culture here, you know. And you know, my best friends in Toronto are like Tibetan, Canadian, and you know, fourth generation Canadian, and you know, so it was a shock, you know, coming here and not seeing, you know, Black and brown people, seeing groups of Italian people or Portuguese people or Brazilian people, or Indian people. And that was just my first experience coming here. You know, I knew that, I didn't know, but I came to find out that, you know, all of those cultures existed here. I just had to find them, you know. It just took time.
Do you remember when you first heard about the historic displacement of Black people in Vancouver? But it was just in the 70s. I was alive. Like it was not that long ago. So it's not like history, capital H, but you know, do you remember like what your first reaction was when you heard about that?
To be honest, I was my first reaction was, how did I not hear about this before? Because it took years before I heard about it. Like I had been living here probably, to be honest, about 7, 8 years before I even heard about anything about, like really heard about it. You know, I would hear in passing, you know, Hogan's Alley, or I would hear, oh, Jimi Hendrix Shrine. You know what I mean? But then the conversation would change. It would never really go past the surface. You know, there was no depth to those conversations or the history. So yeah, it was, you know, so many things. Joe Forte, all of that stuff was mentioned, but there was never any like concrete kind of, you know, information. So yeah, it was kind of like these elephants or like these shadows, you hear about, but you never see elephants
These
in the
echoes. Yeah.
yeah, these echoes, so to say. So yeah, it was interesting. So when I did really hear about it, I was, I went through the range of emotions as you do when you hear about any people being displaced or oppressed. So it was really shocking. And a lot of times cities will have reputations and and branding and stuff, but at the end of the day, everywhere there's stuff going on, and stuff behind the scenes, so to say, or off the beaten path. So when I found out what was going on in Vancouver, I was like, wow, it ain't just mountains and oceans and eagles. There's a lot going on here. A lot of stuff has happened here. So
Yeah. I'm so fixated on Calabash, and I can't wait to go to Rise Up. Before we start recording, you were talking about mushroom patty on Coke, and I'm going to eat that. I'm excited. But before we get to Rise Up and also the film specifically, I feel like we do need to talk about Calabash Bistro and show it the respect it deserves, because it is such a special spot. And for a lot of people in Vancouver, I mean, it's fun. It's where you go to dance. It's where maybe it's their first experience. Maybe they've lived in Vancouver all their lives. They've never been to Caravana, so like this is their first experience of, the Caribbean culture and hospitality and fun. But tell me about give me it. I saw you had superhero stuff at Rise Up. Give me the origin story for Calabash Bistro. Then
the
what
origin
is
story.
yeah, because it's
Well, truly, Calabash has the backstory is so interesting. Okay, so myself and a couple of friends started an online radio station called Foundation Radio.
Yeah.
And essentially what we wanted to do is we started meeting like poets and musicians and DJs, and we'd go to these nights and we'd be like, guys are so dope, it's so cool. But where do you guys hang out? And there was nowhere. There was nowhere for them to really jam. There was a couple of things happening, but nothing in the soul, funk, reggae, poetry, spoken word area.
Yeah.
So we decided to just reach out to DJs and start this night. We came across, ironically, the cradle of civilization, this Ethiopian restaurant on Main Street. And this gentleman, Asafa, just kind of took a chance with us. He was like, yeah, I'll give you Tuesday nights to bring some people in. We'll see how it goes, kind of thing. He's a really, really beautiful man. And so, yeah, it started off with some spoken word and some MCs and then a DJ. And then it just kind of grew into singers and vocalists, small bands. And we went from 6 or 7 performances to 15, 20 a night, and it was every other Tuesday. And we were building community. People were getting to know each other. And then all of a sudden, people who never met were doing, jamming together or doing songs together and duos. And it was just beautiful. It was
you are building community.
Yeah, we were all building it together.
Yeah.
It was such a beautiful thing because it was so organic. And it was when I say innocent, it was we didn't have any other intentions other than listening to each other perform.
Yeah.
That's all it was about. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about anything other than art, and I think that really resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so we were doing events just in the Ethiopian restaurant for a while, and then it started growing into doing them into clubs and different venues. And then a friend of mine, Sam, owned a French bistro on Penner Street at downtown, and we started doing jams there on Saturday nights. He had this great location, and Sam was a beautiful, fun guy, and we just had these amazing nights. And not long story short, but essentially Sam and I ended up going into business together. He came across a location in Gastown on Carroll Street through some people that he'd been doing events with, and they showed him a space. And then he spoke to me about the space and said, hey, he just kind of said, hey, I came across the space. I thought about you and thought maybe you'd like to look at it. And then I went into the space, and right away it was like, I'm almost getting goosebumps. I walked in, I was like, what? No one's doing anything here? I was like, I just looked at the possibilities were just going crazy in my mind, like just endless. I was like, so many things just started coming across me. And I was so driven, I was just like, we got to do something, Sam. We got to do something. So we subsequently wrote a business plan together. And then we contacted our third business partner, Colin, because he was a chef. And he was of a Caribbean background, and he was working in a French restaurant. And I had met him playing soccer. So I was like, hey, I met this guy playing soccer. And apparently he's a chef and a good chef. And he has his own theme nights. Like, they are allowing him to do Caribbean nights once in a while. So I kind of approached him and said, hey, like, look, I got this spot. Like, you want to be a part of this? And, like, you can do your thing. You can do your food, and we can all like work together and build something. And that's kind of how it started.
Amazing.
And and then I introduced the two of them, and then it was, from there it was just a mission, and it turned into something that I just hardly any words I can find to describe like how amazing that spot was, not only for us but for the city. And still, like, go to the store, I'll be at like London Drugs or in the grocery store, and someone will be like, Calabash? Look, just pointing at me. Like, it's hilarious.
Wow.
Like, oh yeah, all the time.
I mean, I'm actually not really surprised. Like, it was iconic.
Yeah, and it's not even about like me. It's about like what I was representing on behalf of all of us. Because really and truly, I was down there, most nights, almost every night for the first 10, 11 years.
Wow. And there was a hunger and an appetite for a space like Calabash, for like a community, hub,
I was, I remember going out before Calabash and seeing like really good DJs and seeing like really good live performances and, thinking like, there needs to be a spot that's like, but they would always be in other spaces. And when I say other spaces, like spaces that are curated for soul or funk, So I was like, we need a space that's like for everybody, like somewhere that like everybody can hang out, And, it wasn't just like a rock space or a country space or a house music space or a hip hop space. Like, we did jazz, soul, funk, hip hop, country down there. We had like a blues band. We'd have just everybody, it's very inclusive. So we went back to the roots of the music,
And around that, the community was built in a city where people, I mean, like even in the film Union Street, we're like, oh, there's I didn't think there was a Black community in Vancouver. I didn't think there were Black people in Vancouver. It's like, no, you just got to give the space the place. And
there's a lot of Black people in Vancouver. If you ever came to Calabash on a Friday or a Saturday night for a reggae night over the last 12 years, oh man, it's such a beautiful thing for us too, because like people used to bring their mom, their grandmother, their family. People had family in town. It was that spot. People came and brought people there. One of the, I think, biggest compliments for us was that, like, I feel like almost every Saturday or Friday for like 8 or 9 years, it was birthday parties. Like, and I always said to the guys, like, you have to understand how special this is. Like, people have that day, one day a year, and that one special day, they're choosing to be at our spot, and every weekend. Birthday parties. And I was like, okay, we're doing something special here.
Yeah, you're part of people's special memories.
Yeah, like people are choosing to come here and bring all their friends and family and celebrate here. So it became like a celebration kind of space, celebration of life, while we're still living. Beautiful.
Did you at the time, or do you now in this moment, do you consider yourself a community leader, considering, the fact that you your instinct was to build events and then build a space where people could gather. Is that a way that you see yourself?
To be honest, not really.
Yeah.
I've been called that, or I've been spoken of in that way. And I think that's, a compliment. I feel honored that people would see me in that light. But to be honest, I feel like leadership isn't something that I can bestow on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm doing the right things, or if I'm doing things that people are seeing as leadership or seeing as being a leader, then I'll just continue doing what I'm doing. Yeah. I feel like that's not something that I could say, like, I'm going to do this so that everybody can follow me. Because I don't feel like leadership is about that. I feel like leadership is like a verb or an action. So it's like, you got to actually do things. And yeah, I know, so I get a cliche, leadership by example. But like literally, like
it's a cliche because it's true.
It's about,
yeah.
On the real, I feel like if you just do things, because I get inspired by seeing people do things, not necessarily all the time by what people say. I am inspired by what I read and what I hear, but I also am more inspired when I see people act on that, And yeah, that's just kind of my view on that. Like it's come across my way, and the only thing when people say that, like, oh, you're a community leader, you're doing this for the community. I'm like, well, it's all of us. Like, community is like all of us doing it. I'm just like one spoke in the tire, and in the wheel, sorry. And if we have many people working together, we're bringing different dynamics, to the situation, then we're all creating something together.
Yeah.
And I kind of try to sometimes flip it on people and say, well, it's not me, it's you too.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the way I deal with it, and let people know that, look, you're shining your light, or you're doing your part. I'm just doing my part,
Yeah.
And if it happens to be sometimes organizing or creating situations or spaces, then that's my part. But I also look up to the people who are actually performing. I look up to the people who are rehearsing, who are, so we all have our part, and when we work together, it's beautiful.
So at some point we go from late nights at Calabash to early mornings at Rise Up.
Yeah.
Tell me about your inspiration for the name. I know a lot of people have a lot of different associations with Rise Up. But for you specifically, what does it mean for you?
Yeah, it's got a couple folds to that, they say 10-fold, it's like 11, 12-fold for me. But essentially we opened during COVID. And so there was a lot of people at home, a lot of people in situations that weren't ideal for everybody. Like, some people were at home alone, some people were at home with partners, but sometimes that wasn't the best situation. Some people were kind of just, I feel like there was an energy there where everybody was separated for a while, and it could have been your views on what was happening. It could have been where you were located. It could have been fear of what was happening. So when we opened, I felt like there needed to be some kind of positive energy in terms of like a place for people to go and feel good about themselves. And me included, yeah, like I was going through my thing, everybody was going through their thing. And I felt like when the opportunity for Rise Up to open came across my lap, so to say, I was like, it needs to have words that are empowering in terms of uplifting people's liberty, like people's energy. So whenever people say it, moving forward, it's always going to have like a positive connotation.
Yeah.
Kind of like the way some cultures have meaningful names. So it's kind of that intention. So yeah, my partner and I came up with Rise Up because we felt like we needed to help people rise up their vibrations and their energy and rise up their spirits And so that was the intention behind the name. And then it just, after that, it was all about cultivating a space that kind of, gave the name its true feeling and meaning.
Yeah. Okay, so I know if people have not watched the documentary yet, as soon as they're done watching this or listening to this, they're going to race to watch the documentary. But yeah, to those people, then let's paint a picture then of Rise Up. So I step into Rise Up and I'm closing my eyes. What can I find there? What can I buy? And
first thing,
most importantly, what can I eat?
The first thing that's going to happen, and I hear this because I'm in Rise Up sometimes for hours at a time.
Yeah.
So I get desensitized to the fact that when people come through the door, the first thing they say 8 out of 10 times, they're like, whoa, it smells good in here. I can't tell you how many times I hear that. And I'm kind of like, I guess it does, because, my man Desmond in the back or Emmy, whoever's in we're baking cocoa bread, we're baking cookies, we're baking patties. We're going through so many patties that we just have to keep baking patties. So there's just a constant smell of patties baking in there. And because of Vancouver, the nature of the weather, sometimes I'm like, my Caribbean soul is like, close that door, So I don't realize that I'm literally hotboxing the store with the smell of patties and cookies and hot cocoa and our sandwiches. We grill our sandwiches on a panini press. So I would say the first thing that would happen is the smell is going to hit you hard I say the word beautiful a lot today, but in a lovely way.
It works. Beautiful works. Yeah. So good. Okay. And so I did notice in the documentary, because I am famous in my own mind as a nerd. I love pop culture. I love video games. I love sci-fi. Okay. So I saw you have an arcade game in there.
Yes,
right?
We do.
You got
we do. We got an old school. We got an old school Pac-Man machine. You don't need any quarters. It's free. Free 99.
Free 99.
It's free. So basically, you can go nuts, and it's great. If you die really quickly, you just start over. And it's a lot of fun. To be honest, when we got that, I was like, oh, the kids are gonna love it, but the adults, they're the ones who are coming in and being like, Galaga? You have Galaga? Dig Dug? Pac-Man? Because it has a bunch of games on it. So it's really fun to hear and see families families playing it. It's something that I've seen a lot of dads and their daughters or moms and sons sit there for long periods of time and have a patty and play 2-player Pac-Man. And, moms in their 40s and kids 7. And it's beautiful. It's just so great, or their 30s or whatever it is. And it's really nice to see how that one machine is bringing bridging the gap. I've been in the kitchen many times and heard many grown women and men screaming and yelling just because they're trying to get away from the ghosts. It's
very high stress situation.
Yeah, very stressful.
I get it.
It's not an easy game.
No, not at all. And as I mentioned a few times, and I'm going to segue into talking more about the documentary now. Yeah. We get to see, although not smell, but we can see Rise Up quite a bit in the film. We get to see you interacting with customers, literally being people coming in, you're like, no, we're fine. And I hear Jamila in the back, we're like, oh, no. What conversations did you have with Jamila before filming? How did she explain the film to you, and what was important to you?
Her passion.
Yeah.
She was so passionate about it, and it wasn't, there was so much passion about making a film, but I think what grabbed me was her passion for making this film. You know what I mean? People can get excited about making any film, but the look in her eyes, I could see she had like a deeper interest in making this particular film.
Yeah.
You know? And when she spoke, it was like there was no questions about like whether or not it was going to be solid. I was like, I would love to be a part of this. I knew right away the way she spoke, the tone in her voice, the passion she had, and the drive that was exuding from her. I was like, yeah, I would love to be a part of this film in any way possible. And like, yeah, I would just love to be a part of whatever you're doing. And that was the hook for me. And you know, and then of course when she told me the story and why she's making it, and you know, Ray, I was like, yeah, I need to be a part of this. You know, in some way, like I'll share whatever you need from me, you know. So
what was your most memorable moment or day from filming?
You know what it was for me? It was like seeing young, talented artists all coming together to make this film. Like the crew. You know, and to see a young Black woman like directing it and bring it all together was really, really lovely to see. Like it was just, yeah, it was inspiring. It was inspiring in a lot of ways. You know, it's just, you know, not to sound like an old head or whatever, but like, it's just, it's inspiring to see like younger people all coming together and working together in that manner, you know. And there was like, I'm not part of their crew, their situation, but from what I saw, like just so much positive vibes and support for each other.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I mean, there's something so, I mean, even the conversations that I've had with Jamila, like you could see that she's propelled forward by joy. Like joy plays such a big part in the work that she does, you know?
She's just joyful in nature.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, she's one of those people that you feel good when you're around them, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and it could be something in her eyes or the way she smiles or the way she laughs or the way she tells a story, but she's one of those people that like you can kind of just sit there and lose time with. For me, you know, like when she comes to the shop, I kind of forget that I'm working for a moment, you know, because we're just kicking it, you know. Like I ran into the other day on the sidewalk, we were walking and we just started chopping it up, and it's just like natural right away because I feel like she's just one of those people.
Let's talk about that thread then that runs between yourself and all of the other Black Vancouverites who shared their stories in the film, because that was one of the things that really struck me was, you know, the different cultures, the different ages, the different artistic practices and you know, ways of being, and yet, I mean, all together, you know, showing that there's a Black community in Vancouver, and they're dynamic and vital.
Yeah, and talented.
So talented.
You know? So that was the thing. I was like very, not to say impressed, but I was just blown away at like how many different people are doing cool things in the city. You know, if you go to like the Caribbean Days Festival, for instance, and you go to the vendors, and there's so many people doing so many cool things. And, you know, Jamila captured, you know, a taste of that in the film, you know, with the businesses that she showcased. And there's a lot of like really cool things happening in the city. You know, it's just, you gotta seek it a little bit. It doesn't slap you in the face like it would in New York or Toronto or Montreal or something like that. Vancouver's got a lot happening. You just gotta kind of find it, you know?
Yeah. Now, what kind of feedback have you received from people who've watched the film?
Oh yeah, it's been I actually messaged Jamila. I'm like, you got to come in here and let me feed you, because it's been tremendous how many people have come to the store after watching the film. It's still like probably right up until this week, people come in and, you know, they'll say, I saw you in that film, or I saw you in the movie, or like it's been amazing how many people have come in.
Yeah.
in that film. Yeah, it's had a really profound effect on a lot of people in the city in different ways, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of people who've lived in the city, I've heard, you know, from so many people that I've lived here for years and I had no idea what was going on, you know, or what had happened, or yeah, I would say it's a very educational film, and I think that's the impact I've been hearing from people when they come into the shop. You know, they come in and they all sound like they've been enlightened or they've learned a lot.
Yeah. Know? And are we talking, you know, people of all different backgrounds, or
all backgrounds?
Yeah.
All backgrounds, all ages too.
Yeah.
You know, from like anyone from like 9-10 years old to 69 or 70, or, you know, like, yeah. I've had like seniors come in who've seen the film, because a lot of, you know, some of the seniors were around in them times, so they come in and share their side of the story or their, you know, perspective of what was going on, and that's been really cool too, to hear it from people who were there.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember their moms, you know, fighting for the bridge, the railroad tracks at Raymer. Or, yeah, I've heard a lot of really cool stories.
Yeah. Oh, the militant mothers. So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's some really amazing conversations at that shop. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to read something that that Pearl Lowe says in the beginning, towards the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And she said it, and I had to pause it and type it out because I thought it was kind of like it was very painful for her to say and to hear. It's hard to exist in a space where you don't see yourself reflected. And it almost feels like imposter syndrome every day when you're walking through a city that was intentionally trying to tear down a space that did exist for you at a certain point in time. Mm-hmm. That was very powerful. How does the past and the fact that the city displaced and tried to erase its Black community impact not just your present, but also your plans for the future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are some powerful words.
Yeah.
You know, and you know what I could say to that is, for me, I feel like it's important to be aware. So I don't like to run from things that may be difficult to learn about. You know, I like to learn and understand what happened. And then that way it can help me understand why things are the way they are today. And that impact alone helps me make decisions towards the future, because I can't really make decisions based on what's happening right now unless I understand where I am and what the environment is and what the playing field is, or what had happened before I got here. You know, because that definitely leads into the energy or the vibe of the people. Like, we're all a product of our environment. So you can't live somewhere without feeling or exuding some of the things that are happening around you.
Yeah. And
so for me, myself personally, like, I use what had happened in the past as, you know, I'm not going to say motivation, but even more of a reason to do what I'm doing. You know, just, you know, you can call it an act of resistance, or you can call it inspired to continue. But for me, it's like, yeah, I've seen the struggles of people before me, so I know what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
If those before me can do what they were doing back then I can do what I'm doing now.
Yeah. I mean, you know, being joyful can be a form of resistance.
Absolutely.
Staying put or coming back can be a form of resistance, right?
Well, I mean, we live in a land where, you know, people were not asked, but told not to dance, not to sing, not to wear certain clothes, not to have your hair in certain ways.
Yeah.
So all of those things, every time we do that, we find joy in that, you know, and every time we laugh, every time we hug, every time we joke around, every time we sing, dance, all that stuff, it's an act of resistance. But not only more important than that, you know, instead of putting energy in who we're trying to resist, we put energy to ourselves. So it's an act of joy and love to ourselves, self-love. And it's who we were originally before any of these, rules or things were put into or implicated on people. So, when you laugh and dance and sing and cry and share and hug, you're doing what you were supposed to be doing, what your ancestors were doing.
Yeah.
It feels good. It feels good. It feels good to see somebody, smile.
Yeah.
It's infectious.
When I heard Pearl speak those words in the film, and then to see the images from just when I was still alive in the 70s, it's hard not to feel angry and pain. Is there, as a path is charted forward, for the community, to heal, to build something, new, that centers joy. Is there a place for anger, as well? What role do you see anger playing?
Well, I mean, I feel like, personally, if you can't have that emotion when you understand what has transpired, then there must be something missing within you. That's a natural and real emotion that we all have. And obviously we all do our best to suppress it, or to, for some people, control it or ignore it. But, when you're going through, I would say, historical situations, I feel like I go through a range of emotions. I go through pretty much almost all the emotions. There's times when I've been angry. There's been times where I'm joyful. There's times when I've been sad. There's been times where I'm proud.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just being human, and I don't feel like that needs to be ignored, and I've noticed that just in my lifetime, people have asked oppressed people not to be angry, and I think that's kind of, ignorant. Not kind of, it's very ignorant. That's like asking someone not to cry when they feel a certain way. Like, don't cry, like, don't be angry, regardless of the situation, or get over it. So I hold space for everybody to express all of their feelings. And I think that's what's cool about Rise Up. It's like, it's got this like hair salon barbershop kind of vibe where you can come in there and just share. And there might be someone in the corner having a patty, and they might be like, yeah, I feel you on that. Or they might just turn around and be like, ooh, listen to this conversation. And people come in there and they share. And, I've had people come in and hang out for like 20 minutes. And I'd be like, oh my God, that's right. I came here for food. I got to go. Can I get blah, 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 blah. And then they're off, and then they're gone. Because, I don't want to use the term safe spaces or whatever. It's a place for people to just come in and be themselves, and it's refreshing, to be honest, for myself. And I feel like a lot of people express that, because you can't genuinely be yourself in a lot of places, not in Vancouver, but I mean in the world. Like a lot of places, you walk, especially coffee shop kind of retail spaces, it's kind of hard to be yourself and be comfortable with being yourself. And I think that's what I enjoy seeing people, is like putting their feet up, calling their friends, or just like talking about whatever. Like I've heard the most random, deep conversations, and the most random conversations. And, I just,
that's amazing. That's got to be the next documentary. just all about what you're overhearing at Rise Up. Yeah.
That's great, because it's intersectional, and like everybody when I say everybody comes in there, all kinds of different people come in there.
Yeah.
I have a lot of seniors that come in there quite a bit. And then I always joke around. I have like, in the last 2 years, I probably made like 20 to 25 new friends under the age of 11 because there's a school across the street.
Yeah.
So I have like tons of friends that come in like 3 days a week, and we kick it. We talk about school, we talk about life, we talk about change, and like, you know, in terms of like them paying and like money, and like it's great. It's amazing.
I love kids. I have a 13-year-old myself. You know, people who are like, oh, the kids these days are this or that, have not spent time with kids these days, because they are just so like, I'm sure that they're compassionate, they're opinionated. Yes.
They're allowed. I think they're just allowed more to be kids in certain ways than my generation in certain ways, you know? Yeah. So, you know, kids these days are asked to be expressive. They're asked to share their feelings. Yeah. They're asked to be themselves, you know, and be comfortable with that. You know, and that wasn't necessarily the narrative in my time, you know?
Yeah, nor mine. Like that, you
know? But yeah, so it's great because I have like really good conversations with these youths, man, that are like smart, right? Like they are aware of the environment. They're aware of like things that like when I was 8, 9 years old, I didn't really consider a lot, you know? Yeah. And it's just a different generation. They're aware of the environment. They're aware of gender. They're aware of, you know, so many things, what they're eating, what they're consuming. These kids will come into the store and pick up like candy and look around, turn around and look at the ingredients, you know? And I'm like, I didn't even consider the ingredients when I was a kid. No. No. I'm not saying all of them. I'm not saying all of them, but it's just a reflection of the times we're living in, you know?
Yeah.
Very aware and self-aware and and opinionated, and it's cool. So I think that's opinions. Probably for me myself, like the hidden gem of Rise Up is I think a couple parents have let me know the impact that we're having on these kids. You know, like I never really thought about it, you know, and until a parent brought it up that like, you know, these kids are always going to remember you. And then I thought about my corner store when I was a kid, you know, and the stores that I went to. And I still remember the guys that were working there, and, you know, whether it was Italian or an East Indian man or whoever was running the shop, I remember, you know. And so it's kind of cool in some ways when parents are like, you know, kids talk about going to Roger's shop, you know, or coming to see you, and, you know, it's something that I never really thought about deeply in terms of like the impact we're having, you know. And these kids, you know, are coming in and listening to like reggae and hip hop and funk and soul and playing Pac-Man and eating patties. And I'm not even thinking about like how the long-term effects are, you know, until other people sometimes bring it to my attention. It's like, yeah, these kids are going to grow up talking about how they used to go to a shop and listen to Buju Banton and eat patties when they were like 7, 8 years old or 4 years old or 9 years old.
That's foundational for them. You're part of their, I mean, we talked about, you're talking about the impact that you are having on, you know, on these kids in your community. But what about the impact of Rise Up and, you know, being in that neighborhood? What's it having on you? Like the impact, you know, the you at the beginning of Rise Up versus the you that's right now.
Yeah. It's changed my life. Like I love it. Yeah. And I loved Calabash too. And I loved, you know, I remember a good friend of mine back in the day said, you got to enjoy every moment and facet of your life. So like wherever you are, you got to think that's where you're supposed to be. So make the best of it. And so with Rise Up, it's like, yeah, it's a complete flip from my old like life, so to say, you know. Like I used to come home at like 3, 4, 5 sometimes, 2:30 in the morning, like regularly. And now I wake up at 6. I can't sleep past 6:15. I can't. And it's just because I'm up and I'm out of the house by 6:37, buying stuff for the store and buying coffee and getting the store ready. And I love it. I love being up in the mornings and, you know, the smell of the baked goods and the coffee. And I'm having like, I made so many beautiful connections at Calabash, and, it's just different in the daytime, in the morning, the connections and the conversations are just different. And I don't know if it's alcohol, I don't know if it's night, in the morning, but it's just, it's just a different vibe, energy, and I'm really enjoying this stage of my life, like connecting with people in the day, in the light.
Yeah, in the light. And you're rising up at 6:15, sleeping in. I hear that.
But it's also a different life where like come 9:30, 10, I'm sleepy. I'm tired, like I'm falling asleep.
Yeah.
So it's different, but it's impacted me in ways that I can't really even put into words, because there's been so many parts about Rise Up that I never really thought about, that are now really big parts of my life, like these kids that are coming in, and the conversations I'm having, and we have like a lot of regulars, and to me that's like one of the biggest compliment, that like people don't come there once or twice or three times. Like there's some people come in like twice a week, 3 times, some people 4 times. There's a lot of people that come through the door, and we look at each other and I'm like, I'm on it. Like I don't even have to ask them what they're having.
Yeah.
Like there's at least 5 to 8 people that walk through the door, and I just like start walking to the kitchen. I'm like, I'll get your jerk chicken ready, or some guy will come in, the construction guy will come in, and I'm like, all right, 3 creams, 2 sugars. Like it's just, and that trust is being built. And I think that's something that I never really thought about, because I never really worked retail before. So it's like, it's different,
Yeah.
It's different. It's a different communication, and different. Yeah, I love it. I really love connecting with people in the daytime right now. And, and being able to, here's another thing too, that I never really thought about. It's like, I have the opportunity to like impact people right away. Like in 1 minute, they could be there in 2 minutes, and I can change the way they're feeling after they leave. And I never, in restaurants, it's different. It's more of a build up, people sit down, and then I was a server for many years. I take their order. It's like a build up. Then they're waiting for their drinks, and they're waiting for food, and then they get it. And it's an hour and a half kind of dance, so to say, which is amazing, because it's like you're going through all these different things together. But with what I'm doing now, it's like someone can come in with a certain vibe, and I have the opportunity to switch it right away. It could be me being like, you know what, take this cookie, man. You need a little, love. Or being like, have you ever had a cocoa bun with your patty before? Or have you ever had this cocoa? It's straight from Ghana. And you can see people like come in feeling good and leaving better, or people coming in feeling away and feeling nice, feeling good again. And people literally tell us that all the time. They leave saying, hey, thanks, I'm really glad I came in here. And it's again, it's so much bigger than myself. It's the visuals, and in the back room we have a culture shop that showcases a lot of local artists. So those artists are sending people in, and it's just, I just love everything about it.
Roger, we are coming to the end of our time together today. So for my final question, I want to talk about the film one more time. How would you like people to feel as the end credits are rolling on Union Street? What kind of questions would you like people to ask? What kind of conversations would you like them to have? What kind of action would you like people to take?
I think people need to dig a little deeper. I think the film is just like an introduction to a bigger story and more stories. And that, it'd be great if people could seek more knowledge and more history about what transpired, not only in Union Street, but listen to more people's stories just globally. Hopefully people can leave the film feeling like they have a lot to learn. because I know that's how I felt. I was like, wow, like I've been living here all these years, and I'm part of this film, and I'm watching the film with everybody else, and I'm learning, along with everybody else. So yeah, I feel like it would be great, if people left the film feeling inspired by what Jamila did, in terms of like putting it all together as a young filmmaker and making it happen and selling out shows. And I think that's a lot to be proud of. Just the actual film coming together is such a huge accomplishment. I couldn't imagine what it all entailed and what it took for that to enter, for that to be shown on a big screen, all the steps before, so so I feel like people should be proud about knowing that there's a local, young, talented filmmaker telling stories, truthful stories about the past. And yeah, hopefully that kind of scratches the surface for people to know that there's a lot more history to be learned, a lot more a lot more stories to be told. That's kind of how I feel, and that people could kind of walk out of that film, that after watching that film, walk away feeling like they could take something from that. It's, there's so much more to learn, and it's endless, and also knowing that Vancouver at one point had a rich, vibrant Black community and history here, which is important for a lot of young Black Vancouverites or young Black Canadians to know that, there's more than what you've been told, and there's a lot to be proud of.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Roger, for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure hanging out and chatting, and
really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening and watching the TELUS Originals Doc Talks, and to our guest, Roger Collins. Watch TELUS Originals documentaries at TELUS Optik TV Channel 8 and watch.telusoriginals.com, and follow us at TELUS Originals on Instagram. Doc Talks are a production of TELUS Originals. This episode was produced by Sharon Bradley with technical support by Matt Waterworth. Ken Soy is the production executive for TELUS Originals Doc Talks. Doc Talks are produced on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations.